Hey guys, a bit of a different video than usual today, without as much memes and shitposting, but rather trying to be as informative and simple as possible, as a relaxed kind of video I can quickly do until you guys get your vote in for the next meme guide. Now on to the problem. So, unless you have been living under a rock recently, you probably know by now that 99% of Reddit posts, Discord banter, and in-game chat coping about top-tier American jets have been focused on one thing in common, saying that the Sparrows suck at top tier. Now, I took that to a bit of a shock myself, because I've been playing various top-tier jets a lot recently since I finished the MiG-23 video, mainly French and American jets. I'm gonna be very honest with you, I didn't notice anything wrong with my Sparrows at first, since I was playing a lot of F-16 and F-14 to grind my F-15. Now, I'm gonna focus on Reddit mostly for some of these complaints about the Sparrow, since they are not only the ones that complain the most, but they often attach videos showing their Sparrows failing to track after launch, which I guess is sufficient proof to investigate. So to figure out what's wrong with the Sparrows, I decided to spend 2 weeks playing almost nothing except top-tier jets with AIM-7F and AIM-7M, where I forced BVR engagements in my F-16, F-14, and F-15. The first game I played on day 1 was a warm-up game, so I wasn't recording, but I instantly dropped an ace in the F-14B, 4 of those kills being with Sparrows. So I started recording after that, and here's how that went. I shouldn't be doing this well with Sparrows according to Reddit, but I am, so what the hell went wrong here? Well, the tinfoil hat idiots on Reddit came up with multiple possibilities, so let's dissect a few of them. The first one, and the most common one I see, is the Sparrow was shadow nerfed. And I'm going to ignore the schizo rambling about what reason Gaijin has done this. I was genuinely curious if the Sparrow was even shadow nerfed. So, I checked the game files on the data mining GitHub repository, went to the files for the AIM-7M and AIM-7F, and looked at their edit history. There was only 4 changes to the AIM-7F and M in the past 4 months. In order, they were a small buff to Doppler rate limit, major bore sight buff, Doppler rate limit buff once again, and 2 days later, a major PID buff that lets Sparrows track without a lock for longer, allowing you ample time to regain a lock instead of just self-destructing shortly after losing it now. There was no changes to the Sparrow since then, besides a small text file reformat on January 2nd that changed nothing with the actual missile stats as far as I'm aware. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So, at the time of recording this video in the middle of February 2024, the Sparrow has not had a single nerf in the past 4 months, meaning the Redditoid conspiracy theories of shadow nerfing the Sparrow last update are completely false. Yes, the game files showed there is changes that were mentioned in changelogs. These were literally buffs, not nerfs. Now I want to give people benefit of the doubt when calling them schizo redditors, so I thought, hey, maybe it wasn't the missile that was changed, it was the radars. So I went and looked at the change history for the files of the F-16, F-14, and F-15 radars. The F-16 radars only had 3 changes in the past 4 months. On November 1st, there was a minor bug fix patch, where all the F-16 radars had their Doppler limits removed, but that doesn't change much. The F-16C received a minor nerf to scan speed and a buff to scan azimuth. These changes were not mentioned in the changelog in the minor update of the same day, and the scan speed nerf does not affect Sparrow guidance in any way, since this is for search mode, not the track mode that you use when firing Sparrows. The next change on December 7th was also not documented in the changelog, since it was actually on the dev server for the air superiority update, and ended up being added to the game when the update went live on December 14th. This change literally just reverted the Doppler changes we just talked about, so you can forget that they ever happened. And finally, on December 14th in the Air Superiority Update live release, the F-16, along with many other planes including the MiG-29s, Yak-141, Viggen, and Mirage 2000, received a minor buff that allowed them to track rear aspect targets better depending on altitude. Moving on, the APG-63 radar on the F-15s had almost no change due to being added recently with only a few bug fixes and tweaks since then. And really, none of them were big enough to be counted as buffs or nerfs. Finally, the AWG-9 radar on the Tomcat did get a few big changes in the past 4 months. On November 1st, just like the F-16, it had its Doppler limits removed. Then on December 7th, just like the F-16s again, that change was reverted. And then finally, on December 14th, when the Air Superiority Update released, the F-14 received a noticeable buff to its Doppler limits, while also receiving a small nerf to its minimum head-on range, increasing from 500 meters to 5 kilometers. The Mirage 2000 also received the same exact minimum range nerf. In the end, it wasn't the Sparrows that were nerfed, and neither it was the radars. So what is causing the Sparrows to go bad? Well, there is many schizo-redditor rambles, but there's only one more that makes sense and holds any water for an argument. Server-side issues. Server-side issues affect many aspects of top-tier battles already, such as flares, IR and radar missile tracking, and various other things. But first, keep two things in mind. First of all, this isn't always the case. While it does indeed happen rarely, it's very stupid to blame every single Sparrow fail on server issues. Second of all, if the servers really were shit enough to break radar missiles, it would happen to all of them, and indeed, this would be the case. Kinda. You see, in the rare case I get a missile that shits itself with no explainable reason, right off the rail, it can be any missile, not just Sparrows. I've had this happen to Sparrows a few times, alright, but I've also had it happen to R-27ERs, and Super 530Ds, and Sky Flashes. Really, a server-side issue isn't going to discriminate against a single type of missile. So if this is the cause of the problem, then it's a problem with all missiles, and not just Sparrows. But again, this is such a rare thing that I doubt it's what's messing up all the missiles. Because I don't see Skyflash, R27ER, or Super 530 users complaining about losing track nearly as much as I see US mains, and only US mains, complain about the Sparrows. You see, even Japan and Israel players don't complain as much about the Sparrow as the US players do, despite having the same exact missile, on the same exact plane, with the same exact radar. Now, rather than dissecting every schizo-redditor take on what could have caused the Sparrows to stop working, I'm gonna skip right to the point in what I think happened to the Sparrows. Now, I need to point out that I noticed a pattern while I was stroking my Sparrows for 2 weeks. The vast majority of planes that I came up against in BVR were the Su-27, MiG-29s, F-4S, and the same exact Tomcats, Falcons, and Eagles that I was flying. Whenever I came up against something that was not a flanker or an American jet, I usually died because most flanker and eagle players are flavor of the month idiots, since the jets were added recently at the time of this video, and the rest of the American jets at that tier are flown by double lobotomized donkeys with the average IQ of the plastic CD case for the Blu-ray copy of Top Gun Maverick. Now listen here, Redditors, before you dislike the video and write 16 paragraphs in the comments about how Gaijin's a state-funded Russian propaganda outlet, you need to remember the Tiger problem. Quoting Spookston when he described this, people new to War Thunder will likely select Germany as their starting nation since they watched all those documentaries calling the Tiger an unstoppable killing machine, and they wanted in on that action, so they select Germany and rush towards the Tiger expecting to be unkillable with very little skill. Likewise, the same exact thing happens to American aircraft, but to an even worse degree. Little Timmy has just watched Top Gun Maverick, and now wants to rush the Tomcat because it's a super maneuverable mega fighter jet that can kill 5th generation fighters, clearly. Or maybe they spent too much time on r/non-credible defense and think the F-15's 103-0 KDR is because it's an F-15. And likewise, buy the F-4S in-game, bomb bases with 0 skills for a month, learn nothing about top-tier BVR, dogfight regimes, proper weapon employment, or defensive flying, and get their shiny new F-14 and F-15 only to get clubbed around by anyone with an IQ above single digits. So instead of being like Pete Maverick Mitchell, they end up a bit more like Devin Boot Jones. And just as Maverick says in the hit movie Top Fun Marvin, it's not the plane, it's the pilot. I mean, remember, every single new and some old 12.3 top-tier jets moved to 12.7, but the F-15 for some reason stayed at 12.3, because 90% of F-15 players are those same F-4S space bombers with no idea of how to dogfight or BVR, thinking the F-15's impressive KD in real life was just because of the plane. You know, not because of the incredible and rigorous training that US Air Force pilots have to go through, or the incredible tactics of their commanders and leaders, or the fact that they fight nothing more dangerous than 60-year-old MiGs flown by Iraqi conscripts. Therefore, they think just by having the MO 103-0 jet, they should also be unkillable, which is obviously not how that works. Remember, in practice, once you close the gap, the F-15 is easily one of the best top-tier jets right now, being able to beat anything that isn't a Gripen in a dogfight above 700 km per hour. And with more flares and more reliable avionics and weapon systems than the Flanker, it's really a balanced and even fight right now up close for those two. Just don't go BVR with a Flanker player who knows what they're doing. And then, as I said that, I had two possible thoughts come to me. The first one was that maybe the Flanker is just OP. And yeah, I wanted to test all the possibilities too before putting out this video, so I whipped out my own Flanker for a few days, climbed to space at the start of the match, and did not abuse the R-27ER. See, the only rule I had was that I would fly defensively and close the range. The rule was that I had to use HMD to lock onto people before firing my radar missiles. HMD lock only works at 10 km or below on the Flanker. This means that F-15 players in space will have 35 km to fire their Sparrows at me, and I will not be able to retaliate unless they let me get within 10 km. And if that wasn't enough, I'm also taking exactly 0 chaff. I'm using flare standard loadout on my Flanker, meaning to defeat radar missiles, I'm simply going to fly at cold angles or defend with proper evasive maneuvers. This clip perfectly sums up what happened with about 90% of the people I ran into. I get myself close to 2 F-15s, high up after a lot of defensive flying. Now the first one's already switched targets after missing his Sparrow on me and tunnel visioned on some other plane, launching a Sparrow at him instead. He takes exactly 0 defensive measures against my radar missiles, no defensive flying, no evasive action, he didn't even drop a single flare or chaff. Remember, he was actively defending earlier, but now he's completely blind and oblivious because he's tunnel visioned on a target he's launching the Sparrow at. He dies a quick death, and we move on to the second F-15. This one is only slightly smarter, which is not saying much. I use the bore sight mode to find him, which has the same 10 km range as the HMD, and launch an ER against him in Hobbs while I start actively cranking. Now I'm going to pause the frame here and let's play a game. You have 10 seconds to name 3 things that he's doing wrong that directly resulted in me winning the engagement. Okay, time's up. So this guy has managed to do almost everything wrong in a short-range BVR engagement. First off, he has a solid lock. He's had one for a few seconds according to my RWR. But he did not fire his Sparrow until after I fired my R-27ER for some reason. And even then, the R-27ER at this close of a range does not have the time to accelerate to its full speed, so if he had cranked to drag out the R-27ER's flight time, he would have in the very least traded kills. Or, of course, if he cranked right, he would have easily killed me before my R-27ER hit him. At the moment of his death, the Sparrow was barely 3 km away from me, meaning it needed around 2 seconds to hit me. A crank would have easily given him this required time. Or, you know, he could have just launched his Sparrow earlier. Instead, he decides to fly directly at my R-27ER, taking 0 evasive maneuvers. And this is when we get to the fourth thing he did wrong. Yes, there was a fourth one, so bonus points if you found it before I pointed this out. He is actively dumping flares and chaff, but flying in a straight line at my missile with 0 attempts at notching or breaking the lock. Yeah, 90% of people I run into here don't know how chaff employment or notching works, and this is a prime example right here. If you want me to make a tutorial on these things, please tell me in the comments. Okay, before you go and type your 8 paragraphs in the comments about how the flanker is actually broken and the stupid Redditor conspiracy theories about how I'm just dick riding gaijin because I'm a content creator who's paid for this, I'm not. I decided to take out the Mirage 4000 for a spin. Remember, compared to the F-15s, the Mirage 4000 has worse IR missiles, worse radar missiles, worse radar altogether, worse high-speed performance, less flares, no HMD, but for some reason, it's a higher battle rating than the Eagle and the Tomcat. So surely the plane that is worse than the F-15 in every imaginable way, but still at a higher BR, should not do as well, right? Well, you're correct, it didn't do as well. It did even better. I ended up with a KDR of 7 in this thing, for one reason. France often fights against the US in the matchmaker at this tier. Pretty much everything I killed was an American jet that basically handed me a free kill on a silver platter, because A, they are blind, B, don't know how to dodge one of the worst radar missiles at top tier, C, decided that not turning off their afterburner while flaring missiles was a smart idea, or D, all of the above. The only things I died to were Gripens and non-American export F-16s and F-15s. The flankers were almost always useless on either team, so I didn't have to deal with those guys as much. So in the end, to sum up, I found exactly what doesn't work with the Sparrow. It's the brain, or lack thereof, on the average player flying the F-15, F-14, and F-16 after bombing bases for a month in the F-4S, not learning a thing about dogfight regimes, weapon employment, or BVR tactics. These guys watched Top Gun once, or saw some cool vaporwave edit of the F-15 on TikTok, and expect a plane to be unkillable because it's American. Not because, in real life, the pilots flying these things underwent months of heavy training in tactics and doctrine, and have smart tacticians and controllers leading them into combat. This clip I'm playing in the background perfectly sums up what I'm talking about. This F-15 here has launched all 4 of his Sparrows, within seconds of each other, in 6 kilometers at rear aspect against me. You know, which is not a problem normally. These Sparrows should have connected, except for 2 small problems. 1, I'm also in an F-15, so the closing distance at top speed is non-existent. 2, there is teammates in the way, for him that is. One of his Sparrows will directly fly into a teammate and team kill him, while the others will simply lose track after trying to home in on said teammates. Again, this guy knows nothing about weapons employment, or how to use the Sparrows, and now he'll probably go on Reddit and make a coping post about how his Sparrows don't work. There is nothing wrong with the Sparrow in-game, and the few times I genuinely had server issues that caused my missiles to miss are not special because that can literally happen to any radar missile in-game. And it happened to the Sparrows, I admit, and it also happened to the R-27ERs and the 530Ds as well. I have lots of clips of those, while I was playing the other planes. I thought it would be fun to talk about this issue and clear up some misunderstandings the community has. I know this video is a heavy deviation from the normal memes and cinematics, but I really needed something to pass the time until you guys vote on which plane you want for the next meme guide episode. Which right now looks like it's going to be the F-104 family. Oh god no. Anyways, as usual, until next time, don't crash on takeoff, and go show those pesky SC-27 noobs what your glorious American missile can actually do. See you next time.